Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here, back with my comic book thoughts after over 3 weeks, I believe, since the last one that I did. It's getting to be a bad pattern where I'm a comic book obsessive, so I feel I must talk a little bit about everything I've read, or it's just become my habit at this point. So I'm going to try to do 33 fairly quickly. And, maybe anyway, it's most of what I've read in the past 3 weeks. I'm going to start with all the Charles Soule books. There was the Swamp Thing, number 28, had a guest or new artist on it, Javier Pena, who was quite good, and the coloring also was quite outstanding. Is it still? Yep, still Matthew Wilson, definitely a colorist who I'm coming to admire a lot. And we get to see the Swamp Thing in a bunch of different settings, like in New Orleans there, out on the desert, the Salt Flats. We get the background of Capuchin. It was quite interesting. I enjoyed this issue. It had the nice sort of lively rhythms, that sort of you're not like aware of any rhythms that consciously aware of the rhythms Charles Soule does, but I'm realizing that one thing I like about his writing more than a lot of other writers is the sense of a rhythm in all of his books, a kind of ebbing and flowing rhythm. And this was no exception. I'd say my only, and there were some really cool scenes, my only question mark is, why is Swamp Thing so ready to give this woman Capuchin, who has just had many, 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 many lifetimes as a killer? She's sympathetic in the sense that she was raised to be that way as a child. But why is he giving her sanctuary? What's his thought process there? I'm not 100% clear on that. But still, she's an interesting character, and there's some interesting developments. I'm very interested in the now returned to their human shape members of the Green. These are going to be really cool characters. And something interesting is brewing at the end of the story that looks very cool. We also get a glimpse of Etrigan the Demon. I don't know if he'll show up again. But yeah, it looks like some kind of religious cult that worships the Green, or the Avatar, has shown up. So that'll be interesting. So I hope the rumors that I just heard about on Twitter that Swamp Thing might be coming to an end are not true, because this is the best Swamp Thing in a long time, as many others have said. So then a lesser Charles Soule book, or so it's feeling to me in the last 2 issues. I liked the first 2 issues a lot. Last issue was a little bit weaker for me. This is even weaker. I partially blame the art. I think when the scriptwriter is delivering a kind of medium good script and you have a bad artist, it becomes more noticeable. And I guess I shouldn't call him a bad artist. Other people might love him. I mean, one theme to my reading this week, this past month, was hearing other people's reviews and being sort of amazed at things some people thought were horrible that I thought were great, or vice versa. Because sometimes you feel like something is obviously bad, and then someone else comes along and says it's great, or you think something's obviously good, and someone rips up the whole comic book. So, I think that this was kind of an in-between positioning kind of issue, where Charles Soule has somewhere else he wants to get us to, and I didn't have that sense of the good Charles Soule rhythm to the storytelling, but I wonder if some of that was because he and the artist are not working together that terribly well, or the artist is he's quite a bit better in the outer space scenes, but he's particularly bad at kind of the talking head Earth parts. In contrast, all of She-Hulk, which was a lot of talking, was fantastic. And Charles Soule, in my opinion, so a lot of people had a problem with the art in this. In my opinion, Charles Soule and Pulido Javier Pulido, another Javier, worked together fantastically. And I also loved the use of the bright colors. It was, to me, I was kind of dreading reading a book about lawyers, and to me it was nice that they took this kind of retro comic booky feel to it, while dealing with She-Hulk's life as a lawyer. And there was a lot of talking, but I stayed engaged, and I think that was a combination of the visuals and the writing. And it, without being in your face, I thought the art actually did a lot of clever little things. You got this sequence here, which is really nice, and it really handled kind of her encounters with the corporate world in a charming and interesting visual way. And as everyone knows, Charles Soule is a lawyer, and it's nice to see that he's not taking the side of your typical law firm or anything like that. So he's got plenty of interesting axes to grind against the legal system. So I was delighted by this, and I will be continuing to read it, especially if Pulido stays on it. I think the two of them work together really well. And then finally, in the Charles Soule side of things, were 2 issues of Red Lanterns. One was, they came just a week apart, and one was combined in this flip book with the Green Lanterns, all for just $2.99, which was a fabulous deal, and a great way to promote the 2 books if it had worked. Green Lanterns 27 was quite good. It had that good Charles Soule rhythm to it, interesting character beats, interesting funny moments. You get the funny, you get the serious. I don't know much about this character. I don't know how much of a history she and Guy Gardner have in terms of past DC comics, because I never really followed the modern, or even the semi-modern Green Lanterns. So anyway, I really enjoyed this issue. I was really there was a bunch of interesting plot threads developed here. I was really looking forward to the next issue, but you had to start with the Green Lanterns, and it just didn't work. It didn't have what we're just talking about, of that flow and the great storytelling kind of meshing of the artist and the writer. The art was decent enough, but it just didn't click, and I felt overwhelmed by the Green Lantern world, which just seems too complex and just too many characters and not anything that I could hook into or care about at all. And things improved somewhat once we got to the Red Lanterns, and we picked up on some threads of the plot, but it did seem like the whole endeavor ruined that rhythm that I'm thinking Charles Soule has. It was not a standout Red Lantern issue. And I don't know if he's someone who so much blows you away at any one moment, but it's kind of the accumulation of what he does that is very, very good. So I have no fear that, in general, Red Lanterns will continue on to be pretty good. But this little experiment failed. I don't think it was a great way to encourage any new readers on either book. Sadly. I have found a music video by Charles Soule. Before he was writing comics a lot, he was focused on his music as his side project, along with being running his own law firm, or his own law practice. But it's called the Charles Soule Band. Maybe if I can find it, I'll link it down below. But his music kind of has some pop structures and then goes off in kind of interesting, funky or jazzy jams and then comes back. And that sense of kind of rhythms and breakdowns and then back to the main themes, I think has something to do with both the way he writes music and the way he writes comic books. So anyway, that's my thought on Charles Soule. Probably went on too long about him. I've got so many comics to get to. Loki, I enjoyed. Good art, decent writing, kind of an interesting beat to the characters, and All the other characters were well played. For my taste, it was a bit on the slick side. I would happily read this comic book, but I don't feel a personal connection to it. I don't feel strongly about it. So I'll probably pick it up if I have slow weeks, and it's still looking good. But I'm not hooked deeply or anything. And it just seems kind of slick and clever, but not connecting with me in any special way. The kind of peak of Marvel right now is these one-shot when there was a bad story arc, or to me a bad story arc in Thor recently, but other than that, Jason Aaron's Thor has been magnificent. This one-shot issue was just fabulous, in no small part due to Dos Pastores, an artist I've never seen before. I believe he's Spanish. I know he's European, and has mostly done work in Europe, because I looked him up online. He's done some pretty sexually explicit comics in Europe, it seems. But he has this really cool style. I'm not sure if it's painting or mixed media or even, what do you call them, pastels almost. But it just looks really great. It really fit Thor really well. This was kind of a bittersweet, funny, then sad kind of Thor story of Thor's youth. More one-shot stories like this, please. It was great. If you're interested in Thor but don't want to read a whole bunch of issues, this is a great single issue. You don't need to have read anything else. Just need to know that this is young Thor during the medieval ages. On the downside for Marvel was All New Invaders. I thought James Robinson and Steve Pugh, I can't miss. I've loved a lot of their work over at DC, and it's just a belly flop here. It's just bland, uninteresting so far. I have foolishly committed myself to 12 issues, so perhaps it'll change. I hope it will change. Both the art just didn't even feel like Steve Pugh's art, but I think I might do more on that in another video. 2 issues of Earth 2 during the period that I was reading. The annual and issue 20 continues to be great. I really enjoyed the annual's origin of this second Batman of Earth 2. I won't reveal it in case you haven't read it yet. I recommend it. If you're enjoying Earth 2, you should get this annual. It just cleverly enriches the whole experience, I think. And feeds right into the main story very well without being part of the main story directly. So yeah, this continues to be good. Tom Taylor taking over from James Robinson, who I was just talking about. He knows how to make a comic book, rocket ahead in interesting ways. I'm really excited about exploring more of the Red Tornado. It does feel like maybe Taylor is pushing aside the characters that Robinson had focused on mostly, but we'll see if he gets back to them. But other than that, I'm loving Earth 2. It's definitely one of the really good DC books right now. Another good DC book, Action Comics. I've talked about it before. This issue was a little funkier, because there were these weird creatures in this underground world that the residents of that world were turning into an energy source, and Superman decides to rescue those creatures. But we don't know if those creatures are sentient. I mean, would Superman need to rescue cows from us humans who are eating the cows? It might have just been that kind of situation. There is kind of an interesting twist on it at the end, and this may all be about a young Superman not really making the best choices. So I'm definitely still on board. Still really good. Justice League 3000 just keeps getting better to me. This is the comic book that some people have hated. One person ripped up his copy. I think the art's excellent. I think the story is both funny and highly imaginative. It's definitely kind of almost a spoof of the Justice League in a way, I guess. But it's just really a really cool book. It's still early days on it if you can get the first 3 issues. Of course, your taste might not be like mine, but if it is, jump on it. So, yeah. Also good, but not as good, by Tom Taylor, is Injustice, Gods Among Us, Year 2, Issue 2. It was kind of like a decent, old school, for the most part, old school DC story. Because this kind of features mostly the older versions of characters. But it kind of was like a quieter issue where we're building up to something for the next issue. So, decent issue. I'm still on board for that. Oh, here's a great DC comic. God, I'm praying, don't let them interrupt the storyline for a while. This new storyline with a vampire hunter who thinks the whole Bat family are vampires is really cool. And when you think about it, a vampire hunter who is hunting the wrong not hunting vampires, but killing humans, he's a serial killer. He's basically a serial killer. Maybe just his whole fantasy way of this rich guy being a serial killer by convincing himself of this idea of vampires. But it's a interesting story. There's a lot of interesting stuff about or involving Batgirl and Strix, the owl who is a member, I believe, of the Birds of Prey, which I'm not reading these days. Great art also. So anyway, all around, and great cover. Great book. This was so-so. It felt very old school. It's a Earth 2 story, a tale of the two heroes, Huntress and Power Girl, when they were Robin and Supergirl on Earth 2. And they encounter some apocalypse type of characters and Wonder Woman. And it's kind of like 3 stories in one, and it was pleasant enough to read. To the point where it makes me think, if I had nothing better to do, I might pick up some more issues of World's Finest. I enjoyed it well enough, but didn't knock my socks off totally. Anyway, Adventures of Superman. This was a good story. So the usual pattern in Adventures of Superman is there's a 20-page story and a 10-page story. This was a 30-page story. And I think that the 30-page stories are weaker. This would have been better, in my opinion, as a 20-page story. It was a good idea, fun stuff about a version of Bizarro and who becomes cured. So it kind of had a Flowers for Algernon kind of feel to it. But it stretched on a bit too much. I think if it had been 20 pages and they'd done another story, I think they're doing more and more. As I've glanced at the digital first that this comes from, I think they're doing more and more 30-page for them on the digital 3-part stories. I wonder if that's easier for the editor rather than rounding up writers to do these shorter stories. But I think it's a shame. I think what's been great about this is that art form of the really short stories. But I think the next issue may just have 2 stories in it again. So it was an okay issue, but not the best. The Flash, this I got. I had removed it from my pull, and they put it in my pile anyway. My shop is continually screwing up the pull, but I decided to go ahead and buy it. It was a pretty good mystery story. So now I guess I have to read one more issue. And I like the art quite a bit, even though it's not Francis Manapool, it's Patrick Zurcher. So yeah. Then I've been enjoying bits and pieces of Blight, and it kind of Blight will be working for me. This is Forever Evil Blight. It just says Forever Evil on the cover, but it's actually the Blight storyline in the dark part of the DC universe. Blight will be working for me, and then it'll get too abstract and wordy, and So I don't know. I don't know if I'll pick up, other than Phantom Stranger, which I'm committed to, I don't know if I'll pick up the remaining issues of Blight. I love the art, as always, in Justice League Dark. I hadn't read it in a while, and it reminded me of how much I missed that art. I also heard someone say that that artist is leaving. He's been on Justice League Dark for 27 issues. Mikael Janin. So anyway, yeah, Blight's kind of up and down constantly. Okay, so I think I'm done with my big 2 books. Thank you, anyone who's still there, for sticking with me on this long, not fast enough set of comic book thoughts. The Royals Masters of War. It had a lot of cool art. I found the motivations of the characters a little muddled, like as if bits had been skipped. Maybe we'll come back to them, of the full story of how he decided to get involved in the war and the relationship between the royals and their armies. The art is cool at points, but then other times looks kind of awkward. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to keep picking up the Royals. It turns out this is a mini-series, and I didn't know that at the time. 1 of 6. So I might just wait for the trade, or even maybe get the trade out of the library. We'll see. Lazarus. I'm on to Lazarus for the long haul, I still believe. I enjoyed this issue. I think the writer's spreading out the focus in the last 2 issues to include more characters, more parts of this world. So including some of the waste, the poor people. And we're getting subplots with revolutions. Now the main subplot that started all along, which was that Forever needs to find out she isn't really a member of the family that she thinks she's a member of. She's been given secret messages, and that's... So I thought the revelation of that was going to happen for her, but that's been postponed. She doesn't believe the secret messages she's gotten. So it's really stretching out there. But there's a lot of... I enjoyed this issue. It's very bleak. I'm a little dreading if we're going to follow this journey of these these waste farmers who are now lost their farm and are going to work their way towards the city. So it's going to be grim. I felt just a touch let down by Baltimore Chapel of Bones, issue 2 of 2, because this is the grand finale where he faces his monster, faces the vampire that he's been hunting throughout, 20 miniseries. He's been hunting this one vampire, and now he finally comes face to face with him, and they do battle. And some interesting stuff happens, but it's not... It was kind of anticlimactic, and it was a little forced the way they created a situation that will continue the story. There was some intriguing stuff too, don't get me wrong, and I will continue to buy further Adventures of Baltimore when they come out. Apparently now he's going to go around with, well, maybe I shouldn't say it. Still love the art, but just a little bit. It's hard. It's so hard to end stories, and the longer a story is, the more likely you are to be disappointed by the ending. I haven't read all the chapters of Baltimore, but the few that I've read, there is this sense of this long story and long quest to meet up with catch up to this vampire that he was trying to get. Trillium, this was the weakest issue of Trillium so far. I still am a big Trillium fan, but I got to admit, this issue just had us flipping the page. Where's some upside down pages? Just because they'd had a lot of other flip books, they felt this issue had to have flipping in it too. But I think he ran out of a good gimmick to to need the flipping. I've really come to love the art, and I hated the art when I first started the first issue. I love the coloring. But this seems like he's dragging his heels. There's 2 more issues to go. Maybe he was padding a little, or he hasn't quite figured out. I hope he does know what he's going to do. But I almost would suspect he's buying time while he figures out what's going to happen next. Saviors issue number 2. I liked Saviors issue number 1 a lot for the art and for the kind of low-key science fiction story, in a rural setting with aliens invading that it had. But this issue 2 already kind of hit the wall, jumped the shark. Just a huge amount of talking to explain what was going on, and it just seemed kind of goofy to me, and so I'm definitely off of Saviors, which is unfortunate because I'll miss that artwork. 5 Ghosts, the story revved up again. The last issue was a bit of a filler issue, I felt like, and this issue was good. I don't quite understand. There's this woman who also has a ghost, and he might be someone like Sinbad the Sailor. But there's a really great flashback sequence that's done in sepia tones and what looks like raw pencil art that I really enjoyed the look of that. I always like very loose pencil art when done by a good artist, of course. So this was a fun issue. It's still total bubblegum adventure. Kind of reminds me a lot of John Buscema era Conan, really. So yeah. Mercenary Sea was one of my big surprises. I just pick up a lot of likely looking image number 1s, as many of us do, and I fell in love with this, particularly the art. Not just the art style, which is pretty photoshopped, I think, but very well photoshopped. But the artist's storytelling, back to that, the rhythm of the storytelling. I'm sure the writer was involved, but there's a lot of silent panels, and the way the story develops from panel to panel, I just thought was really excellent. It is very much an homage to Humphrey Bogart and other kind of films like that, but in a way that I really liked, in a way that I haven't seen in comic books before. If there were tons of comic books that were homages to Humphrey Bogart, that would be a drag. But one really good comic book that is an homage to that kind of stuff, to me, was really fun. But a number of people on Twitter whose tastes often line up with mine said they were done, that they were one issue was enough and they didn't want any more. So yeah, it does kind of. Basically, these guys are sort of pirates or freelance adventurers with a submarine in the days before World War II's actually kicked in. So it's not to be taken too seriously, but it's quite fun. And probably, I often make up my mind on things on issue 2. It could go terribly wrong with issue 2, but at the moment, it looks like it's just going to be a really enjoyable comic book, and maybe one of my favorite indies if it keeps up the way it has. Whew. Okay, Egos. It was good, superhero-y. It kind of reminded me of a grown-up deconstruction of Legion of Superheroes in a way. Sort of Legion of Superheroes, where are they now? What happened years later? But with a very cynical, very, very cynical edge. This lovely kind of, what I think of as kind of European or heavy metal looking art. So I'm still enjoying this. I don't know if it can sustain this forever, but it was good. Astro City, number 9. This was just okay. And I think there was one more issue to wrap up this story. I think I liked his one and done stories a lot better. and I think that I will switch to trades after issue 10. I like the art quite a bit. I like what the semi-retro art that Brent Anderson is doing. The other aspects of it just didn't click with me. I guess I don't have time to go into it. I'm taking too much of your time already, if you're still listening. Saga, number 18. I love the cover. I liked a lot about this issue. There was a scene, I guess I don't want to spoil it too much, where magically something we were told that can't work did work. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't think Saga has as strong a hold on me, not just because of the waning of novelty, but a few issues back where it was revealed that the opposite of war was, pardon my language, fucking. I just didn't buy that. That just seemed a little stupid to me. And now there was that thing I just mentioned, but there was some other thing that made me feel a little losing patience with it. I can't think of what that was. I still like Saga. It's still, overall one of the best books out there. Black Science, still the first issue, that knocked my socks off, has not been beat by the later issues. The art's very good, not as painted looking as the previous issues. It feels like writing-wise, after packing so much into that first issue, Rick Remender is really spreading things out and taking his time a bit too much to really make the story click together. But on the other hand, it's captured my imagination enough, and it's a good book in so many ways. There's no way I'm dropping off of it at any point soon. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the second issue of the current arc that's kind of a resting point between arcs, I guess. And I just jumped on the last issue, and despite my lack of knowledge, I enjoyed that issue, and I think I enjoyed this issue even more. The art helps a lot. The color and art are just great here. I'm intrigued by a number of elements about the characters, including this, where is she? This non-turtle character. I guess, is she a fox or something? She seems like a very intriguing character. So, I'll be continuing to read the Turtles for a while more. I don't know if I should know about who their mother is. I mean, they call the rat their father, but he's not really their father, so I assume the mother's something like that. Dead Boy Detectives. I liked issue 1. I didn't like this issue. It gave me a sense that it's going to be a kind of muddled series that may not really be about that much as it seemed at first, so I think I'm going to drop off of this. Clone 14 was very good, although kind of, I think, a stepping stone to whatever's going to happen next. These other clones show up who are very good with their swords, and they invite our hero clones to come join them on a mysterious island. Still can't believe how good this art is month after month. But I would say this is definitely not an issue to jump on, and I was so blown away, I think, by the previous issue and the issue before that this is just a slightly less good issue, but it's certainly leading on to whatever next interesting things are going to happen. So those are my reviews. It was a bad idea, I think, to try to talk about 33 comic books in one video. So I apologize. I have more thoughts, but I can't really share them with you now. And now I can hear my family opening up the door and coming home. So I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.